Just
I will.
cover what you know, perhaps. Because I know you do some working on equipment together on it. So
I will give you our philosophy. Shoot from the hip because everything we plan just seems to get adjusted a little bit on the go.
yeah, I've barely done any field research, and that sounds pretty consistent and normal.
Yeah.
All right, then
Remember
we'll get
when
started. Sorry,
Okay.
Zach, go ahead.
Remember when you mentioned Eddie's test plot this morning, and you said some of it was intentional and some of it was not intentional?
Yep.
Research work is a lot like that. There's a lot of unintentional research that gets done.
Yeah. Yeah, I realize that. All right, I'll get us started then. Jim, if you have any topics you'd like to cover right off the bat, as we usually do, you're more than welcome to do that. If not, we can get right into talking a little bit about the picture, but I'd also like to go over the research and then foliar feeding kind of as a science, like similar to what we did. I'll introduce it anyway. Welcome everybody to the May conference call. I hope you're all doing well in these unprecedented times. I know it's frustrating for a lot of us, but I hope that the end is on the horizon. My name is Zach Smith. I will be hosting the call today. I'm the assistant to the director of research, which is Jim Halbeisen. He'll be on this call as well. And then my coworker, I guess, Zach Homer, who Zach, you can list off when the time comes your position, because I can never remember it. Works under Jim as well, and he'll be on as well. The three of us, and hopefully Matt Gooding too, who is our research associate, I guess you could say, and then he's also a district manager. Hopefully he'll be on here, but we'll see. Matt, if you are, just feel free to pipe up at any time so we know you're there. *6 to unmute yourself. For the rest of you, please save questions for the end. And again, *6 to unmute yourself if you do have a question or a comment. The structure of the call is going to be, if Jim's got anything he wants to talk about off the bat, then we'll do that. But if not, I'd like to start with the research. I'll give a little outline of kind of what the company's doing with Matt Gooding. Zach Homer is going to give what he can, and Matt Gooding, of course, if he's on here. And then we'll move on to discussing the picture in the calendar for May, which shows corn burnt from a foliar spray, as well as the intricacies and science behind foliar feeding. So, Jim, do you have anything you'd like to talk about from your conversations with guys or what you've seen in the news or otherwise?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I'm getting as far as calls are concerned is with the temperatures. I talked with a gentleman today that's got cantaloupe under cover, and with that Mother's Day freeze, it went right through the cover for him. He's thinking that maybe he should add two covers over it, but and the internet is just full of stuff. Guys that had anything emerged, we're down into almost central to southern Illinois, and it torched that corn pretty good. Guys are saying some of it has turned completely black on them, and the big discussion now is, how long do you have to let it go to see if it's going to recover or not? And that's going to be kind of an issue for guys, whether they got to get back out there and replant again. And it seems like the experts are saying, you got to give it 3 or 4 days to see, with heat. In other words, for us, we did a little planting right after Mother's Day, and my golly, it just we couldn't get any warm temperatures whatsoever. So I think that's going to be the big thing, is they got to get enough heat to see if this stuff can actually recover from it. And the other thing, tremendous number of calls on fruit trees and that type of thing. Actually, our district manager in southwestern Indiana is giving us reports back that southern Indiana, a good share of northwestern Kentucky with fruit trees that there will not be a peach crop other than the guys that were foliar feeding consistently with the growers. So we think that's really going to bring a lot of light to us down there. And I early in the game, I had a gentleman raising cabbage that called me, and he had planted it. They had set plants, and he was very concerned about it because he actually got snow on it. And he talked about, trying to foliar feed to depress the freezing point on it. And see, that's, excuse me, that's kind of a point that guys got to realize. You've got to, and I'm getting it for alfalfa too. You've got to get the plant or the environment to warm up to actually get the absorption into the plant. And so this gentleman, he never got the heat to be able to foliar spray. Now he had 2x2'd some growers, and he said that the plant roots had gotten over there to it. And I have not talked to him since then to see, if the 2x2 helped him with that. See, the uniqueness about the growers is with the high phosphorus and the micronutrients in there, that acts like a real good antifreeze. And if you can get some extra warmth to build chloroplast content in there, you're going to get more sugar production, which is, again, going to give you freezing point depression, too. So you've got a couple different things that can help you on that side. And then what we're going to see is guys that actually planted with growers in these cold soil temperatures, what their final populations are. And see, that's another discussion on the internet right now is what kind of plant population can you live with? They're indicating 350 corn, with $300 a bag, and they're saying 25,000 is what you can live with. Well, I think they're a little optimistic on the corn price myself, and they might be dead on the price of the bag of corn, but that's going to be a very interesting discussion about, they're saying, just replanting is not always going to be the answer. You're going to have to, cut a fine line on what kind of population you can actually live with. So this has created a real problem. And like in my area, there's a lot of stuff that was prevent plant last year. So, when we got into a drier period in there with the cool temperatures, and guys were able to go, they just went, tooth and nail as fast as they could. And see, now it's looking like that might not have been the right thing to do. We'll see what these varieties can actually stand. But I had a discussion with our salesman on the Delmarva Peninsula, Maryland, and he's working with a gentleman that's buying high calcium lime from him. And this guy plants, 1,000 acres of corn, and he was asked how many acres he had planted 2 days ago, and he said 15, just basically enough to get the planter working. And he says, I'm just not going to slap it in this cold sand and pray for it. So there's, with the late planting last year, guys learned some things about the early bird doesn't always get the worm. But the guys that had to deal with a lot of wet soil and problems with getting stuff planted, it got fit. I mean, I planted some ground that I didn't get planted last year, and man, it planted perfectly. It was nice and dry, good seed soil contact, and it wasn't mucky underneath either. But see, that's from all this drying northeast wind, basically, and so that helped with it. But guys feel that when they get that kind of condition, they have to take it, regardless of what the environment is doing. Well, now that we've gotten the rain, that's gonna fudge that up again. So there's a lot of discussion about what was the right thing to do. The other thing that I'm getting calls on that it's terrible. Guys are asking me what to do with milk, whether we can foliar feed with it. The other thing is just using it as a side dress, basically. The processors are telling them all they're going to get a 15% cut. They won't take 15% of what they normally been producing. And then we've got hog guys that are looking at euthanation on some of these hogs. It's just total chaos. And see, a lot of that has nothing to do with demand, although there's a tremendous amount of stuff flying around on the internet about the beef industry, particularly because the demand is the prices have just gone astronomical, and what these guys are getting at from the packer has been cut significantly. So they got an awful wide profit margin in there, and people are taking sides on how this thing is flying, if they're being honest or if they're ripping everybody off. So that's a big question mark right now. And the same thing in the hog industry is there's plenty of supply, but nobody can go to work, and that's created a real problem. I mean, when processing accepted the Henry Ford approach to this beltline production that you're seeing in the auto industry, they basically played into the hands of the virus, and now they're trying to decide how to get that thing working again. Well, if they've cut a very big margin in there, they're not so sure maybe they need to get it going again. The only person that's really got to bite the bullet's the farmer, because he's geared up production to meet this demand, and now nobody is going to take it from him. So it's created a real problem. And of course that was blowed back into the commodities too. When you look at the price of corn and beans and what's happened there with the shutdown and this Russian Saudi Arabia thing, with that big push of volume out there, just hammered the price. And then when nobody was buying it, when you have negative numbers on a commodity, that's almost unheard of. Although theoretically it's supposed to be able to happen. Well, now they've finally have cut back on production to try to get this thing, a little back into proportion. But again, what the blowback is on livestock production is bad, and then no use in the fuel supply. That just doubles the whammy on it. So how that thing is going to come back, and the internet is talking about is how fast the processors can get back to work, whether it be milk, pork, chicken, or beef. That's a big discussion point, because again, the owners of the processors, they've jacked this margin up so high that it's not hurting them at all. They lose a little bit of volume. They're widening the margin, so they got the same amount of cash going without any expenditure, or a lot less expenditure. So they're looking pretty good on this. So how fast they're going to work at it, because the lawsuits with these people coming back to work too soon, getting sick. Our very good customer up there in southwest Minnesota dealing with that. One packing plant was having problems, so they went over to the other packing plant and paid exorbitant wages and then bust them over there. Well, right away they took the infection back to the original packing plant, or to the new packing plant. So both of them are in a world of hurt now. So how soon they can get them back together, and they're saying the remodeling, the new plants, the packers are willing to invest in them, but the old plants, they're looking at it whether they want to stick the social distancing things in there, the plexiglass and that, and whether they want to make that expense. So if they don't, they're basically going to shut it down. And are they going to go into new infrastructure? That's very doubtful, because again, their margins are so good that even though they're not turning out numbers, they got cash flow to back them up. So that's a real problem. So only time is going to tell us what the situation is with that. The only other thing that happened this week is they had a WASAID report that came out, and again, for once, the government tried to tamp it down a little bit, but they're saying with all this early planting that there's going to be a whopper of a corn crop. So with that, they're hammering away at all commodity prices at this point, and we'll see what the final verdict is on this temperature thing. And I think you guys in the vegetable arena, that's going to be another issue. Anything that you can save early or from your early plantings is going to be a real key, because guys are saying they're just getting hammered from that. And I think it went quite a ways south. I don't really have a line on that, but there were guys down in Kentucky that were telling me there was some significant damage down in there too. So how far south that actually went, we'll start figuring that out when stuff starts coming to market. But that will affect that early stuff. So I think guys just gotta anything you can do to help that, and that's a lot of the calls that I'm getting is, what didn't get destroyed, we got to get it foliar fed, or if it did get froze off and I get a little bit of new regrowth in there, can I nurse that along? And we had some guys up in Minnesota that had some damage on like kidney beans. They had a pre-merge down, and they got a real strong rainfall that splashed the pre-merge up onto their kidney beans, and it smoked them off. They told us basically all they had were stems left. Well, the field man told them to come in, tear it up. Well, those guys went out and they were getting little green growth on those stems, so they just constantly sprayed, like a quart per acre or half a gallon per acre. And then after the spray, they said you could see that leaf structure start to increase, and that's what I keep telling guys. If you've got damage and you do a little bit of foliar feeding, watch what the plant does. If it starts to put out new shoots in that, just keep encouraging it. See, this is the thing you got to be thinking about. You don't want to expend the money, but you don't need a lot. If you can go with a quart or something like that, half gallon, just to tide it over to see what it can do. And then you got to do it more often. You don't jam a big steak dinner into an infant. See, and that plant is basically the same way. So you've got to kind of nurse it along and see. Weather is going to be a big deal on that. See, this foliar feeding, in the heat of the day that we worry about in the summer doesn't apply here in the spring. In other words, you really got the exact opposite. Guys don't know when the plant will be absorbing, and the experience has been once you get up over that 50-degree mark, the plant seems to take it in pretty decent. So you got to get something, in the 50s during the day. And the only time Victor Tejan said that they'd seemed to get, non-activity is over high noon. In other words, when the sun's at its high point. So if you're, say, at 55 degrees or 60 degrees, you can spray all day long other than at high noon. And the plant will absorb it. And actually, you got to get to that temperature. The gentleman with the cabbage, it wasn't getting out of the 40s. And I told him, I said, you're just not going to get it into the plant. Same thing is true with alfalfa. Guys trying to snap that around to see how bad the damage is. You got to get a little bit of heat in order to get it into the plant. And then once you get it in there, down the road, you get another cold snap. That'll help it. The ideal situation is that you were spraying right out of the chute all the time. And see, that's where these peach tree guys, they're trying to get those peaches to do something. So they've been on a regular regimen where they're feeding them. And see, that gets that antifreeze in there and helps them sustain when they get those cold temperatures. And part of that, too, is how cold for how long. That makes a big difference. You get a flash freeze of a couple of hours, it's nothing like something that sticks in there for 6 hours. That's very difficult to overcome. But you get these short events like, just at dawn, you can really help the plant if you've been foliar feeding it and taking care of it at that point. So, and I would say that's those are the biggest discussion points right now.
Great. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. It sounded like it cut out. Thanks, Jim. That's helpful. I guess we'll actually open it up for a little period of questions now, just in case anybody has anything they want to ask or say based on what Jim was talking about. Just give it a few seconds. If you remember to *6 yourself, unmute. You guys heard all that? Did you? From me? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Pardon?
This is Marty Whitsitt. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, there you are,
I
Marty.
hear you, Marty.
Yeah. Hey, something else that's going on with these peaches that survived is there's little ones that are obviously falling off. I mean, they're done for. They were obviously damaged. Then there's big ones that are bigger than the end of your thumb at this point that look great. Then there's some in between. They're still fastened to the stem well, but the growers are questioning what they're going to do. I heard a comment made of calling them a mummy or something like that. That they may were developed into a normal size peach, but they would still make an edible peach. And I was wondering what you knew about that.
Yeah, I can't help you with that, Marty. I don't. Yeah, I don't have any experience with that directly.
Alrighty. Yeah, I mean, like the orchard said, well, as long as it's peach, he'll sell it.
Yeah, sure.
That's all I had.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty.
I'd say keep foliar spraying it.
Yeah, I agree. I think in my opinion, the thing on the foliar spraying is relatively inexpensive for the potential.
Hold on a sec, Jim. Marty, do you mind muting yourself again if you're done asking? Just because I think we're getting feedback from you.
Well, I got a comment that everybody was asking. This is Mike Bolsher. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good job, Mike.
Yeah, there was. I had quite a few of them ask me if they thought bumping it up, coming in there like they were at the last minute, so to speak, when they hadn't done anything, bumping up the rate was going to be better than, using the regular rate of a gallon an acre. And I kind of think with the cold weather, the plant wouldn't really take any more in. I mean, is that right saying, or do you think it'd be better to bump it up?
I think, in my opinion, Mike, is the temperature. If they've got decent temperature, I think they'll get it. But if it stays cool, they're not going to get as much in.
Does that help, Mike?
Mike stays unmuted. Is that Jim talking to him and that carries back through or something?
All right. If there aren't any other questions, I think we'll move into the discussing a little bit of the research that's going to be going on this year and that already has gone on. Zach, if you're all right, I'll try to explain the soil test trial that you and Matt are doing. He and I discussed it last week, so I've got a decent handle on it, I think. If I miss anything, you're obviously more than welcome to pipe up and fill me in. And then if there's anything else you guys are planning on doing, you can come in afterward. Sound good? I'll take that as a yes. So, one of the big things that Matt is doing on an ongoing basis, he started a couple of weekends ago with it, actually doing this. He's got a field. I can't say how large it is right now. Decent size, though. It's a hay field, so it's got a growing living crop in it. And he has staked out positions across it at random, and he's got a section of wire mesh fence that he lays down over these stakes, essentially to give him a consistent plot where that stake is. So he's got 4 stakes that fit on the 4 corners of this mesh, so that every time he lays the mesh down on that spot, the mesh is in the same place, and then he takes a sample each week from one spot on the mesh. So he's taking his samples weekly, a soil sample. He takes a top and a sub sample. He takes temperature readings of it. He takes a swab of the soil for microbes, puts it on a petri dish, an agar plate. Agar plate. There we go. And then he's sending those samples in to a very well-respected lab in the area to get back what you would get on a soil test. And the whole idea behind this project, he's going to be doing it weekly, probably until the end of the season, so into November. And the idea behind this is one of the biggest things that people that have been acquainted with growers for a while know is that we don't put much stock into soil tests, and there are very good reasons for that. And we want to show the variation that can happen in a soil test over the course of a growing season in a soil that has a living crop in it. Because the variations are very large in a lot of respects, both in nutrient availability and pH, all that kind of stuff. Matt's, as I said, he's taking temperature and swabs as well, so he's kind of covering a lot of bases here just to see what happens. We don't really have an expected result per se here. It's more like we want to observe what happens over the season and learn from it, because to my knowledge, growers has never done a test like this, and so I think it could be quite a treasure trove of information. And so we'll have access to the tests he takes, recording how he's doing it. He's got sheets that he's keeping track of where he takes it from and all that kind of stuff. So it's been very well set up, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. That's quite a large one that he's worked out to do this year. Zach, are there any others you'd like to highlight with what you guys are doing with planting and whatnot? Remember to *6 to unmute yourself if you're muted.
Now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right, as I say, I thought it unmuted again. I did text Matt Gooding. He did say he was supposed to be on, so if he wants to fill in here anytime, he's more than welcome to join us also, just to let you guys know.
I'm on.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate that.
All right. So if you want to fill in some more on that soil test one, that's fine. You can go for that.
Yeah, I mean, how Zach described it is pretty accurate. Already a little bit of fascinating things. Just from a temperature point of view, I know we've been talking about that quite a bit. When we started, we had 56 degrees on the top and 48 on the sub, and after this cold week, we are 48 degrees in the sub and 48 degrees in the top, and we designed a thermometer to stick 2 inches in from the top, and then it also we're able to put into a bottom of a 16-inch, it goes into the sidewall of a 16-inch deep trench, so to speak, or core that we're doing right along. So we went backwards pretty bad. So that was one of the fascinating things. The other thing we're doing is we're doing some TDS sampling of that. We're leaching that. Obviously, we're working with this lab really well. Known the woman for a long time. Get along with her over there in Pennsylvania, and she's going to do some the TDS pH aspects. We're going to track moisture, and then we're overlaying daytime temperatures too. We're taking them every day, and that's for a whole bunch of other experiments too. But we're also watching temperature day and night, amount of rainfall. The other thing we're going to start overlaying is humidity, because out of that same field, occasionally we're discussing maybe taking a forage sample from this grid pattern also at harvest, again, just to watch what happens to some of the values based on some of these things. It's going to be fascinating. Where the idea came for this is we are seeing a lot of soils that we see as the biology goes down. We're seeing a lot of the salt load from old dry fertilizer applications, especially the muck soils that have more air content to them, that weigh less on a topsoil basis. We're seeing those salts, the chlorides and the potassiums, coming up and burning the snot out of some of these crops. I've seen it in liquid manure operations when they put that on. We're starting to see that a lot more, so we want to watch what happens to these soil salts in just a good old grower's scenario, and then we may transfer this to another farm too. We're also going to do some core samples, and some of you guys out there, I know some of my customers are watching for this too. We want to do some of these same core samples where we actually send in a soil test, and we actually we swab the inside part of the a core in the top and the sub, and we put them on these agar plates. It's going to be fun to do some side-by-side conventional farms where the growers people run up against that and just kind of see that lay of the land. So we're waiting for some different places that said, hey, you know what, we planted at the same time, we got corn or something in it, and we can go and pull these. So we're going to have a lot of fun with this particular scenario. There's some more levels that will come out of this that we're experimenting with. I know the open nature of this, we're going to kind of keep that a little on the hush at this point. There's a couple other projects like that also out there, but pretty exciting about this whole thing on these freezing temperature scenarios. We got down to 27 degrees here in the farm, and we had no damage on any young clover or alfalfa at all. Really taken aback by that. I was just floored that we didn't have damage, and trying to get an ascertain in the neighborhood what was going on out there. But again, there's a whole aspect of the trace element density, and the word antifreeze, I guess, is probably one of the ways of putting it, but you got to get it in there, before that happens. I know we've been getting a lot of calls too. Can I prevent, freezing with growers? And the answer is yes, if it is applied in a way that we can get it in the leaf and get it in that tissue. We've seen that time and time again. I think we're going to see a lot of purple corn in some of these operations too coming up, or even within the growers network, there's times when we'll see some corn that streaks in purple, and that's from the cold. The phosphate gets up in there until you have enough sunshine and a little heat to get it going. I mean, we see that in greenhouses often that are using growers, and even other products also. That just happens, and it's a sunlight heat thing. So kind of expect a little bit of that, but the vegetables and stuff we plant in the gardens, we keep gardens here that we raise a substantial amount of our food off of, but we also experiment out there also constantly because we have so many vegetable people in our network. And I mean, we were aggressive side dressing these with a little bit of growers, and we're amazed at how this stuff, especially the cold stuff, is just flying through this all. So the only problem is I will say on Sunday, and I'll leave it go at this, how weird is it to be wearing your winter coat and it's 47 degrees and the wind's blowing and you're watering some of these plants, vegetable plants in these gardens, because they're wilting, because the humidity has been at 17%. And I will tell you, I'm getting calls from greenhouses that go, hey, something's wrong with my plants, we got this, and this, and you go look at them and, they're not watering them enough. They're losing moisture much the same way as if it was a July day at 90 degrees in full sunshine. And, the guys water them in the morning, walk away, and, 17% moisture, you get a little sun up, and you just can't comprehend how much water goes in the air. And so that's been a lot of problems. So be careful, those of you with plants or dealers. These guys are calling up in greenhouse operations or outdoor operations. If they're hand watering, or even if they're got it all set up, we needed twice as much water through this whole cold spell, and I've never seen anything like it. Crazy. So I'll leave it go with that.
Hey Zach,
Thanks,
I
Matt.
want to make a comment. If I don't echo, does it seem okay now?
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds good now.
Yeah. Okay. The thing with this soil testing thing that's being done that's very unique is that it's being done with a live crop. The industry has pretty well put the soil test into the convenience of the people and not the importance of the plant. They're taking these in the fall. They do some spring testing, but with what we're doing, it's in a whole different arena with an actual growing crop out there, and the crop is going to be treated, with the growers the way we would suggest. And we want to see what these soil tests show us when you've got a living plant out there and you've got, active biological. Because this is something that we're, really focused on with the purity of the product, which these other things, they aren't considering that at all. And I think Matt's correct on this salt load thing. Because we see that in the upper north central region, western Minnesota, eastern North Dakota, some of these areas that guys are showing tremendous salt damage in the headland that their predecessors didn't have problems with. And they're trying to figure out, what the problem is. Well, I think the problem is that the salt has always been there, but when they were in rotational agriculture and had the biological actively working in there, the biological was absorbing the salt to protect the plant because it needed the plant to feed it. And as we've walked away from that with non-rotational agriculture, and we've advised some of those guys to put on some heavy rates of high cal in those headlands, and then maybe actually do some manure hauling or compost hauling in there to try to rebuild that biological, to protect it from those salts. And the vegetable industry is going to be exactly the same way. They've pretty well abandoned all type of agriculture that builds biological in there. So this salt migration up and down is going to be problematic for them. And I think Matt's on the right track there with that TDS thing. But we get that under a growers program. I think that's something that we won't see. But the other thing, it's got to be measured when the crop's alive. You get these TDS readings, done in the fall or in the early spring. How meaningful are they? What do they tell us? And this is the Zach said, we haven't put a lot of stock in soil testing. First of all, you ain't measuring it, or you aren't measuring it, when the soil is actually working. It's in an inanimate state or a less active state. So nobody's doing anything like that. So we don't have any information to work with. So that's another big point. I feel that this thing will be able to tell us something, and then see what the growers is actually doing. Because if you drag the material into the plant, get it into the root zone with the phosphorus like you do the glyphosate, and you start to invigorate those microbes that are in the soil, solubility of elements is really going to come alive. And we might be able to pick that up with the soil test, depending on, how they're using the soil test. So it's going to be very interesting to see what those numbers show us, in my opinion.
Matt, how many years has this field been in hay now?
I wanted it a good stand of it's a clover grass mix in its second year. It's been on the growers program for 45 years now, I believe. So I don't know. I chose that because of the ongoing nature of the stand, and just the fact that I wanted to watch what happens as we get the soil test as it dries out. That'll be very fascinating. I mean, we're always prone to droughts here in August. I mean, I've to have anything like a third cutting around here normal because you had rainfall is just we just don't get that hardly at all. So I know it's more than likely going to dry out. It'll be fascinating to see what those soil tests and TDS numbers do in terms of number availability. God, just people don't realize that it doesn't matter how much different elements you got out there, that you need that biological to sustain activity when you're losing moisture. So that it'll be kind of fascinating to watch everything as we go, because we're swabbing the top and the sub and putting them on agar plates too right now. And it's interesting that we're not seeing a whole lot of difference in growth currently because the temperatures are fairly uniform between the two. I was kind of taken aback that you'd think there'd be more biological activity in the top and the sub, and I'm not seeing it at the first two rounds. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. It's just too cold, Matt. I think you're dead on there.
Yep. Well, I mean, we're getting growth, but it's uniform growth between the top and the sub, which that is fascinating me. So yeah. And the thing is the other thing too is we got to find a good conventional comparison, because figuring out how long keeping the incubator is kind of interest, because I was surprised how fast they do grow. If you let them in 48 hours, I think it's too long. We cut it back to 24 because it just proliferates pretty quickly and equally. Those two samples, top of sub, I was surprised.
Yeah, no, the other thing
takes off. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, the swabbing that Matt's talking about, when we did the meetings last winter, a lot of guys were just sitting there scratching their head. They, after we explained to them you just use like a Q-tip and then you would swab the sod part to get that onto the Q-tip, and then the agar plate is just that's been used in microbiology forever. When I took microbiology in college, we always grew different bacteriums, funguses. They didn't let us screw with viruses because they were dangerous. See? But it's a growth media that feeds those, and everybody was saying, well, geez, what's this all about? What does it tell us? And see, when they're doing this COVID testing, they're doing the same thing, only they're using a much fancier media to do this, that they can measure it. I mean, what Matt's doing is, compared to what they do today, is pretty crude, but it shows us what we're looking for. And see, in the COVID testing, they're doing exactly the same thing, only they've implemented a lot of technology to it, so that they don't have a plate they got to go through, and then you got to have a certain temperature and all this type of stuff. But the things that he's doing with the swab is, people are saying, well, geez, is that doing anything? Well, it's no different than trying to figure out how this virus is acting. See, the actual COVID test and see the antibody test is going to be a takeoff on that too. In other words, the way they find those antibodies, they've got to have, the actual biological in your system that's creating the antibody. So they're going to do a certain amount of swabbing on that too to figure out whether you've been exposed and whether you're actually creating enough antibodies. And see that the testing part of that is all, speculative, because you don't know if you got enough, if they're active. It's just like the soil test. It's very speculative. It's an indicator, but it's proof positive of nothing.
I wanted to raise too, I'm glad that it's being done in an established hayfield, because microbe communities, while they don't disappear necessarily, they also don't pop out of thin air immediately. It takes time to get them established, especially with fungi. And so to have that field having gone through a season already of growing and not being heavily tilled, and obviously in Matt's case not having any harmful chemicals put on it, gives us, I think it's going to give us a better idea of what's there and how active it is than if it were in a new hayfield or some other kind of crop that was sitting fallow and empty over the winter.
Yeah. The test, hopefully the test will reflect that, Zach, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's good. All right, unless there's anything else on the research side that anybody wants to bring up, guys, we can move into talking about the foliar feeding. 1 second. Got about 13 minutes remaining. We can talk on foliar feeding. I'd like to focus on more of the science of why it works. If there's other points that you guys think are important to raise, then by all means. But given the popularity of the call on why growers works a couple months ago, I think that guys are eager to learn the kind of the background to it. So I can start us off if we want to, and then give kind of an introduction. We can go from there. So basically, guys, growers has been designed to be used in multiple ways, but a main one is foliar feeding, which is spraying onto the foliage, the above ground component of a crop, of a plant, where it's absorbed through the follicle or the cuticle of the leaf and into the vasculature of the plant, which is like the transport system for nutrients of the plant. And so when Doc Tietjens first developed this program, foliar feeding was very much looked down upon. It was assumed that plants only absorb nutrients through their root systems. There was a study that we reference quite often in the 1950s out of the Michigan State University that showed that plants do take nutrients in through their foliage, but the nutrients had to be pure, and phosphorus was the most easily absorbed and transported down to the roots, so basically throughout the entire plant, which is why growers is 20% phosphorus, and why any foliar product from other liquids is going to have the highest percentage is always going to be phosphorus. Now, what we talked about a couple months ago about the importance of growers being a hot mix, that importance really shines through when we're talking about foliar feeding. And the reason for that is that while that phosphorus is easily absorbed into the cuticle of the crop, of the leaf, a lot of other nutrients are not, especially micronutrients. They're too heavy, they're not absorbed well enough into the foliage, and so the idea behind a hot mix is that they're chemically bonded with the phosphorus in growers. And that allows them to be pulled into the plant when the phosphorus is pulled in. I can't stress enough how important that is for a proper foliar product. If anything is cold mixed, be that in the factory where they just agitated it together, or you've got a base NPK liquid product that you just mix in micros in the tank with, you're not getting that efficiency. Sure, the phosphorus will be being pulled in there, and anything that it's chemically bonded to, that being the N and the K, but none of the others are getting pulled in with it. They're not actually chemically bonded. They're just agitated and floating around together. Another thing we can point to for validity in foliar feeding is Roundup, glyphosate. Everybody knows that's obviously a foliar applied product, but it kills from the roots. So it has to get down to the roots. And again, the way it does that, glyphosate, phosphorus, same mechanism as growers, only growers is entering the crop to help it grow, whereas Roundup is entering the crop to kill it. Not the crop, hopefully, but the weed to kill it. That is the basics of foliar feeding. Jim or Zach or Matt, obviously, if there's anything you guys want to add, and then we can. I'd like to leave a period of a couple minutes for questions at the end, if anything piques guys' interest.
Yeah, no, you did. That's exactly right, Zach. You got it nailed. The phosphorus is the driver, and with the hot mix, you're basically, like you say, you're bonding it to assist those heavier micronutrients into the plant. And see, the other thing guys need to remember is with the hot mix, you're getting uniformity of solution too. These cold mixes, guys see stratification all the time. And see, they say, well, you got to agitate, well, you're just mixing it around again. And see, when you work with micronutrients, it doesn't take a lot. So you've got to keep them uniform within that solution, and that's what the hot mix does. It keeps it uniform so that, this square foot is getting a few ounces, and that square foot's getting a few ounces, because as soon as you get that stratification, that starts to disappear. The saying is that if if you got an ounce of growers, if you got a thimbleful or you got a semi-load, it's uniform. And see, that's very, very critical. Very, very critical.
That's a great
And the only other
point,
thing I would like to comment on the picture, a year ago with the planning delays that we had, people that had condemned foliar feeding for years were promoting foliar feeding, thinking that you could just blend anything together and spray it out there. And that burn is from using, lower grade materials, and then they're not hot mixed, and so you end up with burns like that. Now you can burn a crop with growers like that when you get the wrong environment, but this can also happen when you have the wrong ingredients too. And see, they don't believe that the hot mix purity uniformity thing is that critical. Well, it is. And see, that's why it was always used in that vein, or Dr. Tegents developed it that way, because that you get it on that tender tissue, and if it's not balanced or done correctly, and this could have been a time of day, we don't know the whole history on it, but it was being, foliar feeding was being pushed as a way to try to bring the crop around, because with the wet year, there wasn't any fertilizer being spread, and guys were struggling with their planters too, having any excess weight when you use these larger volumes, cold mixes. So they were trying to push the crop back around with the foliar feeding and have absolutely no experience with it.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'd like to bring up and talk about the water quality stuff too.
Absolutely.
Research that Matt did, some of the first stuff he did, showed, like, for a long time, growers has said growers doesn't mix well with hard water. If your water has a lot of dissolved mineral in it, it will react with growers and precipitate out. At best, it'll just plug your screens, but it could cause damage to the crop too, or you're just losing efficiency. And so what we said is you need to acidify the water, add citric acid or vinegar or some other kind of acid to it, and that'll keep the minerals in solution. It'll keep them from reacting with growers, the phosphorus in growers. That is true. However, those minerals are still in the water, which means that they're still being sprayed onto the crop. What Matt found is that that's actually quite a problem. So when those minerals that are in hard water are sprayed on the crop, they're not absorbed into it. I mean, they're obviously not bonded with the growers, as we just discussed. They sit on the crop leaf. And so I'm not going to get into the details of what Matt did, but he showed that those minerals, once the growers has been absorbed and the water's dried off or been absorbed, those minerals remain on the surface of the plant leaf. They can block photosynthesis. They can burn it if it's the wrong stuff. They're not good to have there. And so even with acidified water being mixed with growers, those minerals were still on the leaf. They were absorbed a little bit, but the plant kind of puked them back out when it realized it couldn't use them. And so Matt did a comparison with RO water. Rainwater also works. Any water with no dissolved solids in it, or very little dissolved solids in it. And obviously that water mixes quite well with growers. There are no minerals in the water to react with growers. But in addition to that, it didn't leave behind any dried minerals on the surface of the plant leaf, or very few, or very little, depending on how low you can get those dissolved solids. And so you don't have the problem of blocking photosynthesis, and you don't have the problem of inefficiency with the product. And so what we've learned through that is that, if possible, the best water to use with growers for foliar spraying is RO water or rainwater, bar none. And so obviously, if you don't have access to those, acidifying your water is still quite necessary. Otherwise, you're going to run into all kinds of problems. But be aware that if you are having problems, you're seeing problems in the field with foliar spraying, and you're using hard water, that could very well be the cause of the problems. And if you were to find a source of RO water or rainwater, I would highly encourage you to try that out, because We've seen with a number of people, a number of customers, that has actually cleared up a lot of their problems and helped them in enormous ways. Did anybody else want to add on that?
Add a little bit there.
Sure, go ahead, Jack.
Jim and I's travels this winter. Something that is mentioned in the Green Growers Recommendations book is the fact that in the beginning, Doc did not recommend mixing any water with growers' mineral solutions in a foliar feeding application. And being this was the first year I got to spend a lot of time talking with customers, there is a lot of customers that are really pushing for their customers to not mix any water with growers and to actually buy a small enough set of cone jet tips to just straight foliar feed growers' mineral solution on their crops. There's one DM specifically that one of the meetings I put on for him where he's telling everybody, listen guys, he said, my dad and I run 2 sprayers spraying at the same time. The sprayer I run straight growers in it. I never have anything but growers in it. It's just for foliar feeding. His dad's sprayer has a larger set of tips in, so they mix water with the growers. And they have seen on multiple occasions where the sprayer that was spraying straight growers, those results on the crops were magnified versus the sprayer that had water mixed with the growers. Now, I don't have all the details on the water, but they actually went to the point that if they can just spray everything with the one sprayer and spray straight growers, that completely eliminates that water aspect, and it seems like the plants are using the growers even more. And that story has been reiterated, or those results have been reiterated by 3 or 4 other DMs that I've talked to over the winter. So maybe instead of investing in water purifying equipment or something to try foliar, try getting that extra set of tips to put on your sprayer and multiply how many acres you can actually get out of a tank load of material that way.
Thanks, Zach. That's a great point to make. A lot of in the early days of growers, it was nearly unheard of for guys to mix it with water. It was always sprayed straight. Thanks, Zach. I'm glad you put that up. I forgot about that.
Hey, and I'll add to that. Okay. Zach, I'll add to that.
Ahead.
I'll add to that. On a new pasture, we go out and spray 8 gallon to the acre straight on pasture. There's no issue. As long as there's a dew there, we've never had any burn or anything, especially early on in the season when the plants are used to being in a kind of a freeze-grow mode. That's when I tend to be more strain-oriented. Now, from now on, anything in the hay fields, there'll be water in it, and there'll be clean water. But I've long ago, early season stuff, I'm straight up with any sort of dew and no issues on anything.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
That's a high rate. That's good to hear. All right. It's 10 o'clock now. I'll open it up just for a few seconds for questions. *6 to unmute yourself. All right. Thank you guys for listening in tonight. The next conference call will be June 11th at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. I hope you guys have a good month. And thanks, Jim, Matt, and Zach for coming on as well. I appreciate it. Good night, everybody.
Hey.